Okay, I think we're ready to go. Yeah, welcome to the our discussion of batteries. I'm going to introduce Andrew. This is Andrew Carl. Can't see him from home yet, but maybe you can. Anyway, he's from Revision Energy, who is doing a lot of work now with commercial batteries. They're looking to find as many ways to incorporate those into businesses, and there's angles that he'll talk about that makes that economically viable. Andrew's been with Revision for 10 years. And I would have to say in talks that I've had with him, he's similar to a lot of people at Revision. And these people get into this business because they have a mission. I would say you seem to have a mission. And also Revision Energy is a B Corp, which is kind of a special designation for a company that I don't know, maybe you can explain it better, but it's a company who's striving for the highest values, and they are also an employee-owned company, which I think is a fabulous idea. Well, I turned my company into an employee-owned company, and it works really well, and the employees are very, very happy with that. So anyway, how's that? Wonderful. Thank you for now. Stephanie's going to say something coherent.
Thanks, Nick. So I'm going to introduce our other speaker tonight, which is Kurt Mayland. He is a visiting professor at the Institute for Energy and the Environment at Vermont Law and Graduate School. He was previously at the Connecticut Institute for Resilience and Climate Adaptation at the University of Connecticut, where he also taught renewable energy law, land use law, and environmental law. He's also the president of Taconic Range Energy and Environment, a renewable energy development and environmental consulting firm. He was formerly in-house counsel at Barron Partners, Soltis Energy, and Penn Energy Renewables. Prior to his time at Penn, Mayland was an environmental attorney at Trout Unlimited. He has also worked at Sidley Austin and Morgan Lewis. He graduated from Dartmouth College and was a Fulbright Scholar in Monterrey, Mexico, where he received a master's in finance. He received a JD from the University of Connecticut, where he was a member of the Connecticut Law Review, and an LLM in environmental law from Vermont Law School. So just a little bit about the format tonight. Andrew's going to speak first about residential and small business battery storage, and then Kurt will talk about grid scale storage, and we'll have a little bit of a Q&A after each speaker goes. If you're calling in from Zoom, you can just go ahead and type your questions into the webinar chat, and then someone in the room will make sure that those are read out loud. If you're in the room and you have a question, wait until the Q&A portion, and then you can raise your hand and someone will come over with a microphone for you to ask your question. That way people on the call and on the recording can hear your question too.
We'll talk in the middle.
Yep. So anyway, well, we'll get started.
Great, thank you.
Take it away.
Would you give me a 5-minute warning?
Oh, sure.
We'll put 5 minutes before my 20 minutes. Is that
Yes. Great.
Can everybody hear me all right? Speak with me. How about now?
Better.
Okay.
Small room, so it's all good.
Thank you for having me out tonight, folks. My name's Andrew Carl. I'm here from Revision Energy, and thank you very much for the kind introduction. Thank you. I'll just say a few things about Revision Energy. We are a Maine company that was founded in 2003. It was, two guys in a pickup truck when it was first founded. And today we have about 8 locations across 3 states. We are at about 425 co-owners for the company right now. We've done now over 20,000 renewable energy projects in our territory. We've offset annually over 140,000 tons of CO2, which is something that we're very proud of. As Nick was saying, we're a B Corp. B Corp certification is an international certification that judges companies based on a multiple bottom line approach to business, which means people, planet, and people, planet, and people, planet, and profits. I guess it's saying. There we go. So not only are we a B Corp, but we're considered, in the top percentage of B Corps worldwide with a score of 150 points. And in addition, we're a 100% employee-owned company. The founders of the company sold us, the employees, the company back in 2017. Let's see. And so, yeah, the employees are the only people who own stock in the company. And we own all the stock. We do a variety of renewable energy projects for homes. We do solar, batteries, electric vehicle charging, high efficiency hot water, electric hot water, and air source heat pumps. For commercial customers, we do solar, batteries, and electric vehicle charging. Revision Energy, like many companies in the trades, has been having trouble finding qualified people over the years. And so we have the only in-house electrician school in the state of Maine for any company in the state of Maine. An apprenticeship program where people who are interested in entering the electrical trade can join the company and get their electrical licensing done while they're at work. Let's see. Solar is generally considered to be our flagship product. We're focused on trying to help our customers shift as many of their fossil fuel loads as possible into energy, into electricity, which is in and of itself cleaner in a lot of cases, because much of the electricity that's already on the grid is generated by renewable sources in Maine, hydro and biomass, and then, also wind and increasingly solar. And then to generate as much of their electricity as we can using solar power. We think that's the best way to save our customers money and to reduce their carbon emissions. So we've got a couple of commercial projects here that I'd like to show you. This one's just over here in Brunswick. We got this one in Thomaston. This is down in Biddeford, the old peppermill mill. And this is one of the ones that we did for a municipality. This is on the South or the Portland landfill. We also did Lee Toyota over here, and then Lee Nissan right across the street. So if anybody's noticed those solar panels, I don't know if you can really see the ones on the roof of the Toyota building because it's a flat roof, but the Nissan building you can see pretty well. We do so that's just a little bit about Revision Energy. We're here mostly to talk about batteries tonight. We do residential battery projects like this. We started out just doing Tesla Powerwalls. We now also offer Franklin WH batteries. These are all modular systems. So you can put in one, you can put in 5, however much storage you need. Residential projects like this are strictly for grid backup. When your power goes down, you can shift onto your battery. They don't offer, and there's no programs in Maine today that provide grid service, compensation for any grid services that batteries can provide for residential customers. However, for commercial customers, you can use batteries as a backup, but there's also an array of grid services that they can provide that are incentivized through programs with the utility companies and with Efficiency Maine. And we'll get a little bit more into that a little bit later on. But as you can see, both the from these pictures, both the residential and the commercial batteries are totally self-contained units. They're not sort of a bunch of car batteries with wires sticking out of them. You're not like in the old days. You don't have to water these batteries. They're lithium ion. They take care of themselves, and they all include fire suppression measures inside the container that the batteries are in. So you may have noticed that your power bills are going up. When we get those January power bills every year, it's a bit of a shock lately. The cost of residential electricity is the top line there. It's the yellow line. it's the most expensive form of electricity. But as you can see, every sector of grid power is going up and is expected to continue going up for the foreseeable future. Now that's in Maine, in large part, it has to do with the volatility of natural gas prices. Natural gas generates just a hair over half of all the electricity that we use. And it is particularly necessary to operate during winter peaks when electricity is at its most expensive. It is expensive at that time because you have a lot of competition for that natural gas market. It's not just the power plants that use it, it's also used for heating. And so in the wintertime, that causes prices to spike up, and that affects the cost of electricity all year. Really, the cost of electricity is split into two halves. There's the delivery portion. That's what CMP bills you for. It's their cost for maintaining the lines and getting the electricity to you. And at the bottom of the bill on the last page, they also, through CMP, but it is not CMP that gets that money, bills you for supply, and that is buying the electricity from the power plants. And so the cost of natural gas is the main thing that drives the purchase of supply, which you get from the power plants, up. And that's been the main driver up to now, but the cost of delivery is expected to start increasing more quickly over time, largely because of climate chaos. I know that in Bath, we've been experiencing more and more outages, since I was a kid. I'm sure that's happening in Topsham too. Is that accurate? More outages these days than there used to be? No? Well, it is the case in, basically all over New England that the grid is experiencing more damage over time. It's not just because of climate chaos, it's also because, the grid infrastructure is aging. It's just more expensive to replace things today than it was 25 years ago or 50 years ago. S&P Standard & Poor's expects the cost of electricity in Maine to increase by about 75% by 2035. That's an increase of about 6.5% every year. So by 2035, 75% higher. This is a reason why investing in, a solar and battery type system and starting to shift your, usage out of fossil fuels and into your own solar array makes so much sense, because it helps you today, but the cost of electricity from the grid is only going to go up higher, over the next 10 years. And, so it's an investment for the future as well. The federal rules have all changed around solar and batteries. Now all these projects need to be compliant with the FEOC rules, the Federal Entity of Concern, which basically means none of these components and none of the parts that the components are made out of can come from China. The companies that manufacture them cannot be owned by the Chinese, and the company that is, or the individual that's buying this equipment, cannot be a Chinese company or Chinese individual. That rule has made an impact on the industry. Revision Energy has not been purchasing. We've been purchasing equipment the whole time that we've been in operation that complies with these rules. We cut a little higher in the stack in terms of the parts that we procure, but not everybody has been doing that. And so now everybody is trying to move into this market, and it's pushing supply chains to, quite an extreme extent, and increasing prices. And so these FEOC rules are a good thing because it means more American-made components, but it's causing a little bit of trouble in the industry, especially because we have some deadlines coming up. And so there's lots of people that are trying to procure large amounts of solar panels and inverters right now in order to safe harbor that equipment and protect their tax credits, even though those tax credits expire. One round of expiration happens in this summer, and then there's another round at the end of 2027. So there's sort of a big herd of solar developers and solar construction companies that are trying to get their arms around as many components as they can and earmark them for certain projects in order to protect their tax credits. Fortunately, it's not that serious with batteries because the tax credits for batteries run for a much longer time than for solar. Battery tax credits run through 2032. There are a couple of reasons for that. I think mainly there is in the current federal administration some hostility towards renewable energy, but batteries are sort of a nonpartisan thing that are recognized to generate a lot of great value to the grid and to ratepayers across the board. Maine has had really strong commercial net energy billing programs and residential net energy billing programs, and the residential programs are continuing unchanged as they have been for decades now into the future, which is great. The commercial side is getting a little bit more complicated, and one of the things that has changed is when you have, unlike a residential power bill, when you look at a residential power bill, you're only being billed based on the number of kilowatt hours you're using, and that's energy. Once you have a business that is large enough to require a lot of power, which is different than energy, then you also start being billed based on the maximum amount of power demand that you have during a billing period. And this is a very expensive thing for businesses and municipalities, school districts, it used to be that the solar net energy billing credits could offset those demand charges, and that's just not the case anymore. It's possible that a new successor program is going to be announced later this year that will cover some of those costs, but for now, yeah, I don't want to get anybody's hopes up about that. The good news is that for commercial customers, as well as municipalities, school districts, water and sewer districts, and other large users, battery systems for those types of customers are specifically designed to go after those demand charges and reduce demand charges. That's mostly what we're going to be talking about today. So let's see. When we're talking about batteries, let's forget about the solar for the time being. We'll look at this. Now, if you look at the blue dotted line, that is a representation of what somebody's peak demand might be throughout the course of the day. So if you have a large, manufacturing business, for example, you are not using much power at night. So that's the, on the far left and the far right of the graph there. So the blue line is very low. Now, everybody shows up in the morning and turns all your machinery on, turns all the lights on, and suddenly that amount of power that you need spikes up. And then depending on what type of business you are in and, the way in which you're using power, that load shape will be, it could, it's like a fingerprint. Every business has a different load shape. So it might go way up and then come down, then go back up again, like it's represented here. It might go up and stay up all day and come back down. There might be just one single spike. But the idea of having a battery for these types of customers to reduce their, and I should say, at the end of a 30-day billing period, CMP will come in and they'll look at all the peaks that you had and find the highest peak that you had for a 15-minute interval over the course of the whole 30 days, and they'll put a pin in that and they say, that's what we're charging you for. I use the example of, I bought a pickup truck that's got, just under 400 horsepower, because sometimes I tow a trailer full of firewood and I've got the whole family in the truck and I get my chainsaw and all my stuff in the back. And then I hit the bottom of the hill, in Waldoboro, and I need to be able to get to the top of the hill when all that's going on. So it's worth making a big investment in a powerful truck because I don't want to be sitting on the side of the road being like, how am I going to get up this hill? That's similar to the way CMP builds. They need to be able to build the utility grid powerful enough to deliver all that power that everybody needs all at the same time at the highest point of the year, which is usually in the, early afternoon in July on the hottest day of the year, because all the summer people are here, all the ice cream shops are open, all the beer coolers are opening and closing, and every business is up and running just as hard as they can. And so they need to be able to not only build the grid to feed that load, they need to build the grid 3 times that size, according to ISO New England rules. So the investments that they have to put into the grid every time that number climbs a little bit higher for the demand of the entire main grid is massive. It's the most expensive thing that CMP does. So when Mr. Local Business Owner or Mrs. Local Business Owner installs a battery system that starts to shave those peaks off of the top of their power usage, they're providing a really valuable grid service. They're lowering their own costs, but they're also lowering, cooling off the amount of power that's needed out on the grid and reducing CMP's future need to upgrade the grid. The more of these batteries that go out, the lower that sort of statewide peak is going to be. Because you can charge those batteries in the off hours when they are not, when there's plenty of electricity and plenty of grid capacity to go around. So the value of this program to our commercial customers is you knock down that peak load so they pay less on the demand charge. Also, Efficiency Maine is watching their battery. And they say, if you're deploying that battery during those 6 days in the summer, when the state is at its peak load, if your battery is discharging during those times, you're creating so much additional value for the grid that we're going to send you a check. So that's another revenue stream that comes from these projects. And so, an example of the type of customer that is terrible for batteries is like a wastewater treatment facility, because when they turn on their biggest load, which is the pumps that aerate, they leave them on for 36 hours. So if you were going to try to get that peak load down, you would need excuse me, you would need your battery to discharge for 36 hours. So that's a huge amount of storage that you need to put in there. However, if you have a customer where their peak load only lasts for an hour or two, and it's much higher than the rest of their load, and there's a period of time between that and the next spike for your batteries to recharge, it means you can put in batteries that have a low energy storage but a high power output, and they're relatively inexpensive compared to the amount of value they can bring to that customer. So those are the kind of customers we're always looking for batteries, generating value to that customer, but also generating a ton of value back out to the grid too. Yeah, good. Yeah, and so if anybody's got any questions, would you
go back to that slide?
Sure.
Are you suggesting that, what is BES?
Thank you. We get so into jargon in this business that we forget that not everybody knows. Battery energy storage system.
And why is BES charging from midnight until 7:30 in the morning? I presume you're charging using solar or something.
Customers that have solar can charge their batteries from their solar array, but you don't need to have solar in order to get value from this system. You can charge it right from the grid. And the value is still very strong for those batteries without the solar, because the expense of your demand charge is based on the period of time when you need the most amount of electricity. Whereas, for example, at night, when the grid is not under pressure and your business is not using much electricity, you can, get a little extra trickle in without sort of, tipping the scale back into an expense or a cost center. Yes, go ahead.
So you mentioned that if
Should we get the
or
microphone?
somebody installed one of these systems and they
Oh, would you hold your question just for a second so we can get you on the microphone so the folks at home can hear?
need the name and address.
No.
So you mentioned that if an entity installs one of these systems and they don't draw power from the grid during these magic 6 days in July, they get a check back. Well, how big a check? Usually, I mean, is it significant or is it $2?
So let's see. I believe it adds up to a couple of grand. But it really depends on the size of the battery. I mean, we've proposed commercial batteries that do this as small as about 60 kilowatts of power output. But I also just sent out a proposal for a 2 megawatt battery system. And so the one that's 2 megawatt, you know, it could end up being in the low six figures. But it is a small amount compared to the value of that system on the grid. So Efficiency Maine is saying, let's give you back a portion of the value that you're delivering to the grid, not the whole nut, because we want some of that to flow back to CNP and the ratepayers. I'll be, yeah, thank you.
Is there any scuttlebutt around time of use charges for residential people like they have in other states?
Yeah.
Which is similar to this.
Yeah, that's a great question. So we used to have residential time of use rates available in Maine back when people were putting a lot of electric heat in their house. And you could buy a like a thermal mass electric heater, so you could heat it up in the off, you know, peak times, and then it would deploy heat throughout the day during peak times. It's not available right now. But if I can assume or try to get to the heart of your question, it's like, if we've got these batteries at home that we've got for backup, how can we create a system where they are providing grid services and getting value back to the customer? And that's being done many places all over the world. California and Germany, you know, we're sort of the pioneers of doing this. They can participate in something that's called virtual power plants. So basically, when the need for electricity gets very high in a certain area, if the utility company has the capability of deploying the energy in these batteries themselves at their own choice, then they can deploy batteries back out to the grid or reduce the load that is in the home where the battery is located during times of maximum demand on the grid, and start to relieve that pressure. And that keeps them from having to make more expensive grid upgrades if they can deploy these virtual power plants using batteries, or by talking to electric vehicle chargers and saying, slow down your charging for this, you know, for the next 45 minutes. And then the customers that own those assets can say, I want to opt out of this today. I need to charge my car because I'm going somewhere. There have been pilot programs to study this in the state of Maine using heat pumps, where the Efficiency Maine sent out a signal to the heat pumps that said, you know, turn the thermostat down by 5 degrees for the next hour and a half. And that study was very successful. And so there is unfortunately very slow, but there is a process in place that is trying to create a system of grid services that people can access from their home, which will provide them additional value from their heat pumps, their water heating, their electric vehicle charging, and their battery systems. Does that get to the heart of your question?
Yeah, it does.
Okay.
I have a further follow-up, but I don't want to hog.
Oh, okay. Well, maybe okay.
My question is probably about as basic as you can get. Would you explain the difference between power and energy?
Sure. Energy is power over time.
Okay.
So power in our business is measured in kilowatts, and energy is measured in kilowatt hours.
Thank you.
If we go back to the truck metaphor, power is the horsepower of the engine, and energy is the gas in the fuel tank.
Thank you.
Sure.
There's a question from home.
Okay. Could you talk more about cost and process for a homeowner to install battery backup? I have solar panels. Sure. Well, obviously the first step in any process to getting batteries in your home is to call Revision Energy. And one of our salespeople will schedule a time to come out to your home free of charge and, you know, take a look at your situation and give you a proposal that meets your needs. Batteries are a lot more sensitive to how they are being used by the customer. It takes a little more savvy to be on a battery than it does to be on a net energy billing, solar array. With the solar array, it's on your roof, it generates electricity. If it generates less electricity than you're using at any given time, the remainder of the energy you need flows in from the grid without you doing anything. If you generate more electricity than you're using concurrently, it flows out to the grid, generates net energy billing credits, which then will be automatically applied to your bill. So after you've installed the solar on your roof, you don't have to do anything. With batteries, the first question that any business that might install them in your home is going to ask you is, what do you want to use them for, right? If you have, if you want to back up your router and your refrigerator and a couple of lights and your television, that is a small battery. But if you're saying, we have a 2,500 square foot house, we've got a propane hydronic furnace, that has baseboard hot water. And we want to run that off of the batteries. Now you're talking about running pumps that pump water throughout the house. Now you're talking about a much bigger battery and or a much shorter time that it's going to be able to back your loads up. So the first thing you want to start thinking about with batteries is, what is the minimum amount of stuff that I'm willing to back up in my house? What are my critical loads? Because when we come and put the batteries in, we're going to put a little extra breaker panel in your house called a protected loads panel, and you're going to choose which circuits go into that, and that will dictate how quickly the energy that's stored in that battery is going to be used. I think you probably can't get a good, 14 kilowatt hour battery in your house for much less than about $20,000 for the gross cost. There are still some benefits that can help you pay for that through the state and federal. And then if you want to add more batteries to that, then the cost can go up from there. You all set? Yeah.
I have a few questions. I'll start with.
Great.
Are batteries currently at a place where they're smart enough to charge when it's supposed to, when the load is appropriate, and discharge when, or provide output when it should as well, to help decrease the electrical consumption, thereby reducing electrical costs for consumers?
Thank you. So for a residential customer, I guess, are you mostly thinking about residential, or are you mostly thinking about commercial? Or
I thought we were talking about residential first.
yeah, residential's fine. Yeah, I just want to make sure I'm answering your question well. So batteries, residential customers are only billed based on the amount of energy that they use. So their cost of electricity is not at all affected by their peak load. And so in order to charge the battery, you have to buy kilowatt hours. And then when you deploy the kilowatt hours in your battery, you've generated them using solar. And so there's sort of there's no value to putting a battery in your house as a residential customer today if you're still connected to the grid. It doesn't really do anything for you. It can deploy energy to your house, but you had to put that energy in there in the first place, and why not just use the energy at the time that's being, generated?
Would it be possible to have a solar panel not hooked to the grid, but hooked to charging the battery, and then allowing the battery to run the house so you're not using as much electricity and kind of foregoing the net metering?
I see. So the question is there a way to hook the solar panel to the battery
Charge it
rather than to the grid, so that the solar is never sending kilowatt hours back out to the grid for using net energy billing to offset your bill, but instead it's simply charging the battery, and then the battery is deploying into the house. As far as I know, we've never done a project like that. I'm I philosophically understand why that's desirable, but there's no sort of financial value to doing it that way. That doesn't provide any additional financial value to customers.
That was the last question, was the return on investment for something like that, what would it look like in a residential?
Yeah, so with the battery alone, return on investment is entirely based on, are you doing it instead of a generator? And if so, how much did a generator cost versus how much does the battery cost? And sort of the additional quality of life that it brings you, you know, to have this this backup, you know, and it's quiet, it's not, you know, making all this racket. And so when you look at these costs, you have to think about the install cost, but also what's the cost of ownership over time. And please forgive me, residential batteries is not my core function at Revision. So, but the last time I saw a analysis of this, if you take the lifetime cost of batteries versus generators, we would argue that batteries are less expensive over the entire lifespan. They take about 10 years to sort of meet up with the cost of a generator, because generators are less expensive to install than batteries, but cost more to operate over time. That said, just to be perfectly frank, batteries do different things than generators, right? They've got some things that are better than generators. They're quieter, they don't smell bad. You know, when the power goes out, they kick on immediately. So your, you know, electronics don't shut off and then turn back on. So there's some really nice things that they do. But when you have a generator, usually you can run everything in your house as long as the generator is running. And that's, you're probably not going to have a battery system that can do that unless money is no object.
Maybe one more
Yes,
question.
maybe, yeah, one
Okay.
quick.
We gotta go to Kurt.
So I see your diagram there and I see, you know, there are points in time where the battery's charging and points in time where it's discharging. But like, say you had a situation where like in the summertime, you have lots of sun, long days, you've got solar panels on your roof and you just create all kinds of energy you don't need. And so your battery's all charged up and you don't need it until December. Does that battery, can it hold the power that long, or does it like only hold it for a few hours or something?
Seasonal storage is not really the job of batteries. Not that you can't charge a battery in July and have it store the majority of that energy until, you know, November. You can, but it's just such a small amount of energy compared to the amount of energy you generate in the summer versus the amount of energy that you use in a winter. So when we really are thinking about seasonal storage, there's probably no solution that is household scale, or there's probably no solution that is even very large business scale. Probably the only solutions are grid scale solutions, like pumped hydro would be the prime example of seasonal storage. Pumped hydro being, you have a location where there's a reservoir in a high place and a reservoir in a low place, and when electricity is cheap and abundant, you pump water uphill, and then in the wintertime when energy is scarce and expensive, then you run it downhill through a turbine and generate electricity. There are some other neat seasonal storage ideas, like automated cranes that lift concrete blocks or baskets of rocks and stack them on top of each other and then let them down to generate electricity later on. So, you know, but yeah, probably lithium ion batteries. There's probably not enough lithium on planet Earth to see, you know, store the amount of seasonal energy that we're going to need. One of the other ways of doing it, of course, is building, you know, rather than saying what is the peak amount of electricity that we ever need, and building, you know, solar that generates 100% of that power output, you generate 150% of that power output, so that in the winter when there's less sunshine, you're generating, you know, proportionally more solar. And thank you very much, folks. Great questions. Thanks for the great engagement, and I'll turn it over to Kurt.
Thank you.
Before Kurt starts, I'm Mark Waltz, the Topsham Town Manager, and you may ask, why do we care about grid battery electricity storage? And so I'll give a about 2 minute, here's why. The Bisson Farm, much beloved Topsham institution, was approached by a company that's trying to get a battery storage facility permitted for their property. The benefit of being at the Bisson Farm is you're beside the power lines that used to feed Maine Yankee. So there's a place that can connect to either take or give back to the grid lots of power. The folks that run the Bisson's farm told me that this is really important to their future. They'd like to keep that as a farm as long as they can. But it's getting more and more expensive to buy seed, electricity for the farm, all the things that they need to make the farm run. And they view a lease to this battery storage company as a chance to make the farm survive and help keep Topsham what it is. Currently, a battery storage facility grid scale could not be at that location because of our zoning. So the Energy Committee graciously took on the task of trying to propose changes to the zoning code or any other ordinances we need to add that would allow battery storage to be what we're now looking at is maybe not in that entire zone, but in an overlay district that's near the actual power lines within a certain distance. Things that they're considering are certainly safety of it, what maybe noise might be, fire suppression we already talked, or will be something covered as well. And I think tonight from Kirk, we're going to hear a lot of other things that we need to consider or ways we can deal with them. So without further ado, we're turning it over to Kirk.
Great. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yeah.
All right, let me see if I can share something here. Share screen too. What do you all see right now?
Batteries.
You
see your
the presentation.
Okay, do you see me at all?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, I guess that works. Okay, I get this camera that's like makes me look like I'm right in your face. So I got to do the perfunctory. These are my opinions, not the opinions of the school, just because it'll allow me to talk more freely. So my general background, and this is where I kind of present from, is I've been an energy developer in New England for like 20 years. I just started teaching at school like a year ago. So did a lot of solar, a lot of wind, and have dabbled in the last few years in large scale batteries, both as mostly as a landowner on in Massachusetts next to a substation in Blandford. And for those of you who have researched a little bit about, I think the company that's going to be proposing to lease this land in Topsham is Mission Clean Energy. I could be wrong, and you can tell me if I'm wrong, but if it's them, they were they're in Blandford, and they were across the street from me. I had the better land given I was next to the substation, but they were across the street and they had more land. And their proposal prompted a moratorium in that town on all new solar and all battery storage until they could, I guess, fix their zoning bylaw to address it. And I also have a project in Connecticut next to the substation in Stores. This is on a brownfield, and I've been working with battery companies in Connecticut to put up a large scale battery there, like a 100 megawatt battery. It's a good site. It's next to a wastewater treatment plant, next to a substation, out of the way on a contaminated piece. So, and not next to any residences, but so I've been sort of in the weeds on this. As both a developer and helping sort of towns navigate this process. So a lot of these comments sort of come from that angle, which is why no, weird, I got so many different screens up here. What do you see now? Other background?
Yes.
Okay, so now you see the batteries themselves.
Mhm.
Yeah, so I mean, this is a small, so Massachusetts has been the leader in solar and batteries in New England by far. They are the state that breaks the ground, and Connecticut and everyone else sort of follows their lead. So Massachusetts has had programs to incentivize batteries for, gosh, I don't know, 6 or 7 years at least, maybe more. This was a 2 megawatt battery, relatively small. The stuff you're looking at, I believe, is in the 100 to 200 megawatt range. But these are batteries in Massachusetts. If you put a small solar array in, anything over 500 kW, you have to put a battery next to it. And that's what this was. This was a solar array next to a battery. But you can see that these are so the lithium ion cells are the primary component of a battery. They go into these modules, which you see here over on the right, which are stacked in these racks. I always say like a battery is a big battery is almost like a lot of little batteries, but they're just stacked in shelves next to each other and connected. These racks go into containers like you see here. They almost, in some instances, almost look like big, 40 by 20 storage containers on sites, but they're in sort of these big weatherproof metal shipping containers, or at least they look like it. Inside these containers, you also have your brain of the system, which tells it when to charge, discharge, and allows it to discharge quickly, which the grid likes. And you also have sort of outside the scope of this conversation, but you also have your inverter, which takes that power that it produces. It stores DC power, and it'll dispatch AC power onto the grid, is which we all use, in our plugs and elsewhere throughout our homes for the most part. And then also inside, you have your thermal management systems, your fire suppression, and your energy management systems. And then finally outside, like you see here, those green boxes, you have your transformers, which are, largely full of oil and step the voltage up or step it down depending on the line so that it matches the right voltage. But that's kind of a nutshell of how they work. Just to give a background. Now, you're not alone. I mean, large scale batteries are dominating what we call the ISO New England interconnection queue. Like if you looked at the list of batteries, you looked at the list of projects 5 years ago, 6 or 7 years ago, and ISO New England, and ISO New England is the grid manager for New England. So we're all interconnected here: Connecticut, Mass, Rhode Island, Maine, New Hampshire, and they're in charge of making sure there's always enough power to meet demand. That's their basic role. And they also review new generation coming onto their grid. And their queue right now is 50% batteries. So if you looked up their queue, which you can, and I'll leave these slides so they can be posted on the town website, but you can scroll through it and see every single battery proposal in New England that's real. And I say it's real because once you enter the queue these days, you have to start spending money. But there's 1,750 battery applications in New England right now, which is insane. So what do they do? I mean, they're pretty simple. I mean, Andrew gave you a detailed description. They store power, usually when power is cheap, if they can, and then they dispatch it when it's needed or when they can make money when power is more expensive. So if you're in a state that has significant time of day pricing, you are arbitraging the market to make money that way. You're storing cheap and dispatching expensive to make power. They are short durational batteries. There are no, other than pumped hydro, there are no commercially available, cost-effective, long-term durational batteries in the market today. So what does that mean? If you fully dispatch your battery, it's only going to dispatch before needing to be recharged for, used to be 2 hours. These days you're seeing more 4-hour batteries. So these are not, the primary focus of large scale utility scale batteries is not backup services for when the grid goes down for multiple days. It's just, we don't have that technology right now. A lot of different things out there. As Andrew mentioned, there's some interesting proposals to 200-hour batteries and things like that, but they're just not in the marketplace. But so lithium ion remains the most popular. It's still expensive, but well, it was going down in price. The round trip, meaning that the time it takes to charge and recharge and how efficiently it can do it is high. The efficiency is high. They're they're not movable, but you can move them, unlike some of the other storage, like, obviously pumped hydro. They are modular and can be moved. Importantly for the grid, when the grid needs power, they can discharge quickly, almost instantaneously through those battery management systems. So for the other things these batteries do for the grid, it's extremely effective to be able to discharge quickly. Or instantaneously, even if it's for a short amount of time. And then they last, 10 to 15 years or so, depending on how often they're charging and discharging and what the temperature is like. But they're pretty simple. They store power and they dispatch power for the most part. Oh, somebody sent this to me the other day, and I always think it's good to know a little bit more than you should about batteries or anything you're dealing with, because this just shows you how the lithium carbonate, the main element in the battery, is just prices are skyrocketing now. And so a lot of battery proposals that are out there in the permitting stage are nervous that these prices aren't going to come back down. So again, I always think it's important you understand how these grid scale, think in the middle of a field, 5 acres of big metal boxes, how they make power, how they make money. So they do sell power, and obviously they got to sell power at a higher price than they take it in, because they got to pay for that power they're taking in, and to discharge it, they got to sell at a higher price. The grid does give them small payments, which we call ancillary services. We don't need to know what they are. One of the things they do, and Andrew sort of touched on this a little bit of the concept, is the grid is very conservative, and it needs to be prepared for sort of a worst case scenario. There's a lot of terminology for it, but that demand charge is representative of that type of conservative behavior, because nobody wants to have blackouts, rolling blackouts. They're expensive for the grid, and they're not good for their customers. So they do pay energy generators and batteries for, not for dispatching power or selling power, but for being available in case they need them. And this is called the capacity markets, and the capacity markets are changing in New England, and they're favoring batteries. They're turning into a market where ISO New England, that grid operator, is going to be able to call upon these batteries that are there with their capacity. We call it almost in the day ahead market. Sort of off topic, but the other way they make money is states. States have, for the most part, it's like offshore wind. If states don't buy into batteries, I don't see how they're economically viable. Now, I question this project in Maine, because I don't think Maine's got any utility scale battery incentives. They might, I just don't know. Massachusetts does. They will give, on top of those things I just talked about, they will pay them more money to dispatch power in Massachusetts. They're called clean peak certificates. It's irrelevant what they are, but they want batteries. They want an additional 5,000 gigawatts, I think, of 5,000 megawatts, 5 gigawatts of batteries in Massachusetts. So one of the ways they get there is by incentivizing battery companies to come in. The other thing they do is they hold auctions. We call them requests for proposals, and batteries can bid in and be guaranteed to do business with the main utilities, usually for 20 years. And that's how Connecticut's large scale battery market's been incentivized. It's much smaller than Massachusetts, but my point is, without state incentives, I don't know if batteries work in New England. And so most battery developers have been really focused on places like Connecticut and Mass, or like Texas and California. Andrew mentioned the other thing about batteries. You saw a huge pivot from solar to batteries because tax incentives. The tax credits are disappearing for solar, and so people who had shops who were used to developing for energy now pivoted to batteries because batteries have tax credits for another, up to 10 years. So that was a big reason a lot of, renewable energy developers shifted to focus on batteries. And the other thing, like everything in the energy world, keep in mind, like scale matters. So the margins and the profits in the utility scale battery world in Maine, I think I can say with some confidence, are pretty small. So if they can make those projects bigger and spread out a lot of their costs, leverage their size to get better pricing on construction materials, that's what they're going to do. So 200 megawatts is a big battery. I bet you they wish it were bigger. So I think your town manager administrator mentioned before, the reason they're there is the line. And I am pretty sure, without putting words into Mission Clean Energy's mouths, that they had electrical engineers looking at different transmission lines throughout the region and figuring out where they could put the most amount of power. Because these things are getting analyzed by the grid for the power they're going to dispatch onto the grid at some point. So the grid's they're looking at these lines and saying, I need a big transmission line that can take up to 200 megawatts of dispatch without costing me $100 million. Now, usually, the best thing to do with a battery, just FYI, is if you can find the right configuration next to a substation, that can save you millions. But those are tough to find. I've had a couple of them and they didn't work. So they really search for these large transmission lines. And I was just looking at this earlier, and it looks like you've got either a 138 kV or a 115 kV line in your town, and a transmission station, or excuse me, a substation that ties in transmission lines. Not all substations are transmission substations. Some of them are smaller distributed substations, but you've got a big substation that looks like it ties in two separate 115 kV lines and is pretty close to sort of the backbone of the New England grid, which is that big blue line at 345 kV. So that's the reason somehow their smart electrical engineers figured out that's a good spot to be. Now, by the way, they don't know that for sure. They're guessing like everybody else does, but they're going to go through all those studies with ISO New England, which, by the way, just keep in mind, if you're going into an ISO New England study period, you're probably talking at least 5 years right now. So this isn't going up next week. It's going to take a while. And out of that study process, ISO New England's going to tell them how much they have to pay to upgrade the grid. And sometimes that can, more often than not, that kills a project. Hey, it's going to cost you $100 million to put in a new substation transformer, and then they walk. So none of these projects are real until they've got their interconnection agreements in place and in hand. Until then, they're all speculation. So what do they do? Why are we like, what are the benefits to them? They're a little bit different than household batteries. The grid likes them because they can put power on the grid when they're needed, right? When the power is needed, and they can do it quickly. So if I've got a really hot July, I got a heat wave, and I need 2 hours of power to get me from 2 to 4, a lot of batteries would be good for that. Solar and wind are intermittent. They don't operate all the time. Solar doesn't operate much in Maine. I would say it's like 12 or 13% of the time over the course of a year, night and day, it operates. So it does allow, when solar's cranking or the wind's cranking and the power's not necessarily needed, it can go into a battery and dispatched later. I don't think that's what this particular battery's gonna do. This is just taking power in from the grid and gonna put it back out. Some of that power might be tied to a wind or solar resource somewhere in Maine, but that wasn't one of the drivers for this project, I'm pretty sure. So there's a big issue with putting in new transmission lines. You're very familiar with that in Maine, with that Maine, I forget the name of it, the Connect line that's coming down from Hydro-Quebec. So putting in new transmission lines is a challenging thing in this country for exactly the reasons you went through. And sometimes big batteries can help avoid that. They can store power, release it when it's needed, so you don't necessarily need to connect new generation. You can just time it differently. And this battery is not gonna provide your town with backup power. Backup power, well, backup power. Power goes out in Maine like it does in Connecticut, like it does almost everywhere in New England, because trees and wind and snowstorms knocking down lines. The big storms don't knock down your wind and your solar and your natural gas generation. Those usually, outside of some rare instances, for instance, in like Texas, those usually keep running. It's just the power can't get to your house. So having a battery that size in your town is probably going to help with grid reliability, but it's not going to help the town experience less. Topsham specifically experience less localized power outages. Yeah, I don't want. I mean, I know I'm probably running close to out of time, but again, this is just another benefit of a utility scale battery. So much solar on the grid that when folks start to come home at the end of the day, there's this period of time where solar drops off, power demand goes up as people come home, start to turn down their AC, and there's a need for power to offset this duck curve. And that need for power at that particular point in time, grid operators are thinking could come from batteries. Otherwise, it'll come from other sources which aren't as pleasant. Now, I think Andrew touched upon this, and it's important because if you're concerned about climate change, and that's one of your drivers to accept something like this, is I'll give you an example. So in Connecticut, like Maine, we are at the tail end of the natural gas lines. So we had an Arctic January, and we don't have enough gas. So gas in the wintertime, priority goes to heating. So once all the heating needs are taken care of, there's not enough gas to power our electric generators. So instead of using gas powered generators in January, we used oil. And oil was the number one fossil fuel source in Connecticut in January for the first time in a while because we didn't have enough gas and we don't have batteries. So batteries to some extent could substitute for those oil, we call them peaker plants, if you've got enough of them. So if you're concerned about climate change and things like that, there are good reasons to have these utility scale batteries around. All right, so finally, the good stuff. Why do you guys care? Why, outside of the altruistic climate change needs, they could pay you a lot of money. And I'll show you in a little bit just what that means. Often big projects like this, you'll see in the wind industry and other industries, not necessarily solar, but they can do, along with providing the town with taxes, you can get other things. In particular, for batteries, you're going to want, training, equipment, things, specialized things for your fire department to deal with some of the potential risks associated with it. And then I mentioned earlier, there's the benefit of they do help with the energy transition, given the intermittency of wind and solar. I'm not going to go through every one of these, but again, it's very important you have a good land use attorney. Hopefully your town attorney has one in his office, just to make sure you're not running afoul of state zoning laws, which are going to, in some instances, will guide you into what you can and can't do. I would also, you want to get ahead of things. What Blandford did was put a moratorium in. I mentioned that earlier. Hopefully they did it right. those are allowable if done right. And hopefully you can do whatever you're doing before they vest, meaning before they've spent enough money or done any work where they're going to be exempt from whatever you do. Sounds like you're fine. It sounds like they haven't done anything. So you kind of want to get ahead of that. So do it now and make sure you've got a good land use lawyer to make sure you do it right. Things I would want to decide, first whether you want it or not. And that'll sort of guide how you craft your bylaw. If you want it because of the financial benefits and the other benefits, then you have to think about, when you do your bylaw, what size do I want? So you're going to put a special permit process in. What size is that triggered by? Is it a 5 megawatt battery or a 50 megawatt battery? But you do want the residential and the commercial stuff that's in the garage on your wall probably to be exempt from that process. Some things go without saying. I want good setbacks. People don't want to look at them. People don't want to hear them. I want the right to put in screening. One thing that's interesting is, as I mentioned, like this isn't a real project yet because they haven't gone through, as far as I can tell, their 5 to 6 year, maybe longer interconnection study. And sometimes some people will say at some shops that they expect 90% of their projects at this stage to fail. As long as 10% succeed, they can make up for the lost costs on the ones that fail. So I'm always like, and my attitude is, don't waste my time until you have a real project. And you don't have a real project until you have an interconnection agreement. Now, that might be a little bit harsh, but like, I wouldn't want to spend a year or two working with them going through a zoning process, special permit process, unless I knew they were real. Other things, I'd avoid the sensitive environmental areas, groundwater. If you have a watershed where you pull your drinking water from, maybe avoid that. Again, I'm a big fan in zoning of they got the money, they should be paying for your consultants. So I would want them to hire you, a consultant, to look at the safety and security issues. What you would need. Do you need a new hydrant near that farm? What kind of equipment does the fire department need? And what kind of training? I want to know what's going to happen if 2 to 4 hour dispatch batteries are no longer useful in 10 years, and who's going to come and take it down? So a lot of zoning bylaws have decommissioning sections, but I would want one with teeth. I want you to come in every 2 years and let's talk about how much it's going to cost given inflation and other things. And I want evidence that bond you've bought that'll cover the town in case you go away. In other words, you make them buy an insurance policy that says if Mission doesn't exist, there's going to be several $1,000,000 that the town can access to pull that operation down themselves. And that should be verified and rechecked every few years. Again, you want to give yourself leeway. A good lawyer will tell you to reject a project if it stinks. And you want to make sure in that special permits criteria, there's room for you to say no and survive a legal challenge. And again, noise is not a huge issue. I think they're comparable to like highway noise, which doesn't sound great. But again, if they're not near a house and they're set back, then noise dissipates pretty quickly. So that should be addressed. And again, because of their need to be next to a big transmission line and because of how relatively complicated they are, you're not going to be overrun with like 5 of these. This probably is going to be the only one you see. In my opinion. I mean, you might put together such a great bylaw, it could serve as a model for other towns. And just for reference, I did add New York's model bylaw and Massachusetts's model bylaw. I haven't looked at them. I have no idea if they're any good, but they're there for reference if you need them. So here's the fun stuff. Taxes. What could you get from this in terms of town taxes? So I did a quick news search for different, and pilots are called payment in lieu of taxes. So a lot of these facilities, it becomes, well, I'll say this. They don't want to pay your tax rate probably because they probably can't afford it. They will probably say it's too complicated to figure out how to tax them. So let's sit down and come up with a a tax agreement for 20 years that we're all happy with. So if you look, generally speaking, what I found was outside of Blandford, which is very small, that number, most of these 200 megawatt facilities were paying the town or proposing to pay the town north of $1 million a year. So if you think about it, let's call it a 10 to 15 acre development, hopefully sited right. That's pretty good revenue. They don't put, they're not going to have workers. They're not going to put kids in your schools. They're not going to increase your costs. So it's a pretty good chunk of change for a pretty unimpactful facility. I would recommend you dig deeper if this becomes serious and see if you can how to maximize this, because a lot of towns sort of trust the developer and don't get a fair shake. I look at the Blandford 200 megawatt, 7.5 million over 25 years. It's just comically low. It seems like about $1 million a year you get for every 200 megawatts. And again, you're going to want to have them pay for, if you can, someone who knows this stuff well, because I bet you if you applied your tax rate to the cost of their facility, it would probably be north of $1 million a year also. Yeah, this cracked me up. This was their facility they proposed in Blandford. This was across the street from me. Not exactly the prettiest thing. This was a 200 megawatt project in the middle of the woods, right across the street from the substation. But as you can see, they built their own substation in this drawing. And I had to laugh. They called it the Hidden Clean Energy Center, even though its visibility from the road was one of their issues. So they did a presentation to the town select board in Blandford. I think I was there for it remotely, or at least watched it afterwards. And you can just see how they presented in Blandford, which has now put a moratorium in. So I'm going to stop kind of here, but I just want to point out a couple things. The safety and fire safety issues associated with these things. I'm not going to pretend I'm a technician or an expert. You can Google incidents in California and Arizona where they had issues with, what they call thermal runaway, call it uncontrolled fires. I believe the one in California was sort of a worst case scenario. It was inside. These things were stacked close together. The fire department didn't have the proper training. So I think it's actually still being dealt with in sort of a brownfield status. This was a mission statement, and I think that was called the Moss Landing Project. But as they say, their projects are outdoors with physical separation. Batteries are housed in non-occupiable cabinets instead of a building, and they've got better and stricter fire protection standards than the previous projects. And I actually had a student run through and pull up a bunch of interesting articles on some of the other safety and environmental issues that she found were most commonly discussed. I said the big one is the thermal runaway. But again, I'm a big believer that if they pay for you to hire a very good consultant as part of the zoning process even, and you can set them in the right area, set them far apart, have proper training for your fire department, have the proper equipment for your fire department that might need to be renewed every few years, I think you can mitigate the safety and environmental risk to a point that you'll find it acceptable. And there's just a brief description of what thermal runaway is, which is the biggest fear of a fire caused by a defect in a large scale battery like this. And just some other resources we went through. These are some fire safety websites, some fact sheets put out by EPA, a video by Tesla, just some FAQs in case you wanted to educate yourselves on some of the risk that I said I think can be mitigated, done right, associated with these things. And my summary: be prepared with your zoning. Make sure you have teeth. I hate it when developers come in and they put up a decommissioning bond. They argue, they keep it low. They say in solar, the famous thing was, the recycled value of our components will be worth more than the takedown value, so we shouldn't pay anything. And then the town buys in. It's like, no, that's not your job. They should have a decommissioning bond. It should be renewed. They should prove it's in place. Same thing with the safety and security stuff. If things get better in 5 years, you should be upgrading your equipment and they should be paying for it. And they should be paying for your consultants throughout the process, including I usually push towns I advise in Connecticut, well, Connecticut, Mass, and Vermont to make sure the developers, within reason, also pay for your lawyer. Maximize your taxes. Do not take their word that what they're offering you is fair market. Make sure you do your research and make sure you get the most out of it they can. I'm telling you, as a landowner in Blandford who was looking at a 50 megawatt battery, you saw what the towns are getting in taxes. I can tell you the landowners, I don't know what they offered this landowner. God bless them for getting what they can, but it's battery developers are paying there's a healthy market for leases and taxes. So you should make sure you know what that is and get your fair share. And then I said, along with the tax agreement, if you wanted to do outside of the zoning, some sort of host agreement where they agree to, a separate agreement where they agree to training, maybe they agree to hire local workers, maybe they agree to upgrade the fire department, these are multi-$100 million facilities. So it's good for them and good for you to have the best safety equipment nearby. And they can afford it if the project is real and moving forward, which is a big if for all of these projects until they get through, especially the interconnection process. And that's it. I hope I was within my 20 minutes. Apologies if I rambled too long.
Any questions?
Got some questions for you.
Great.
Could you please say again the noise of these facilities? I'm not sure I got a complete picture there. The sound of a highway, but the sound of a highway at how many feet away?
Yeah, again, I never try to claim I'm an expert in something I've never seen. I believe that noise comes from the HVAC, the fans, the cooling systems, and my understanding is a large system like this would be like I think it's like 80 dBA. So you don't want to live next to it, but if you are, I forget the equation, if you're 500 feet away with screening, there's a good chance you might not hear it at all. So again, they have to prepare as part of your new zoning bylaw. They definitely have to prepare a noise study, and they definitely have to allow you to hire a third party to check their noise study. Because I can tell you from the solar industry, there's been noise issues because of inverters. And the solar companies will often say our inverters make no noise after 100 feet. And once they're up and running, that's not always the case. So yeah, just be careful with noise, make sure it's done right, make sure you have an expert and be conservative. If they say 500 feet, say we want 750, just to be conservative as far as a setback goes.
Other questions? Kurt, you mentioned that the smaller facilities, or maybe the household batteries or the small commercial ones that Andrew was talking about, you wouldn't necessarily license those. And we were kind of thinking that probably the electrical inspections would make sure it's safe enough. We don't need a separate license. But our fire department thought they might like to know if a house has those, because it might make a difference in their response.
Yeah.
You see the little lithium ion batteries for tools will sometimes start a fire in a garage or something.
Yep, that's a good idea. I mean, having some sort of notification process where they just know if you've got a battery in your house so that if there's a fire, they're prepared for it is probably a smart thing. But yeah, I think you're right. I mean, anecdotally, I've got a battery here in Vermont at my house. And by the way, Vermont's got, I don't want to go back to what Andrew was talking about. Vermont's got an interesting system. They give you a battery. They put it on your house. It costs you $50 a month, $55 a month, but you get it. It's a free backup battery for you when the power goes out. And then the grid, the utility can use it for their purposes. So it's an interesting system. But anyway, yes, I think that's a good idea. I think exempting them from sort of the exhaustive special permit process that you seem to be working on but providing that they provide notification, maybe when they, get their electrical permit, they've got to fill out a form and just let the fire department know they're there. That's a good idea.
Great, thanks. Other questions?
I was just wondering what you know or think about the possibility of different technologies coming around, sooner or later.
Yeah, it's a great question. There's a part of me, and there's a part of me that thinks this is all happening way too soon. This is market stuff. This is not technology stuff. They're in New England because they're figuring out a way to make money putting in 4-hour short-term dispatch batteries. And whether or not that's smart for the grid or is too soon is a real question that I don't think enough people are thinking about. I personally think it's too soon. I think that the technology for getting to like an 8-hour battery is probably not that far out. And maybe given all the other mistakes we've made with our electrical grid over the last 100 years, we might just want to slow down and do it right. I look at it like if you have an EV and you find a level 3 charger that's 10 years old, you pull in, you're like excited, you're like, oh, there's a level 3 here, great. And then you plug in, you're like, oh my gosh, this is one of the old ones. I got to wait 55 minutes. And you're like, I wish they had just put in, one of the new ones where, it takes 15 minutes. It's like I think they're moving too soon, but it's coming. And I don't know how easily flipped out they are. I don't think you're going to find companies flipping out their 4-hour dispatch 10-acre battery sites for 8 hours because it's just not going to be cost effective. And they're going to have to go through an entirely new interconnection process. So yeah, if you're indicating that you think it's too soon, I agree. But it's the technology we have now and what people are figuring out ways to make money off of. So
Some about sodium ion batteries. Are they safer, and are they at the point you'll think they'll replace the lithium ion ones in the near future?
I don't know. We had a long series of long durational battery types talk to us and like a week ago here. And again, I'm just passing along third party information. I've got no direct experience. It didn't seem like any of the technologies out there were near commercial readiness. And I don't know anything about those types, but we were looking at a battery that I'm not exactly sure what it did. It was a guy down the road here who had a battery that they stored their power in almost like sand bricks, and the problem was the amount of acreage they needed and the amount of, call it bricks, they needed were, exceeded the acreage of the solar facility they were going to use to charge the bricks. So you're talking like 100-hour dispatch battery sounds great. Wow, what a fantastic thing. That's over 4 days of backup power, but they needed like, 50 acres in a sunny state to do it. It just didn't seem realistic. So there's a lot of ideas out there and inventions and people thinking about stuff, but lithium ion seems just to be the go-to right now. I mean, you've got a pump storage facility being proposed somewhere in Maine.
I think it's up to Crawford or Jay.
Yeah, there's two of them. There's two in New England. There's one big one in Mass. And yeah, I attended a webinar for another big pump storage going up. They were proposing it again, but the funny thing about that was they got all the environmentalists online and they were doing a webinar about it and taking questions. And if you asked them, where are you in the interconnection process? It was like crickets, because once you start that process, that's real money. I mean, at a facility for the size you're looking at, I would say between the engineering and the studies and the payments, you're talking, several hundred, $300,000 to $400,000 just to get through that process minimum. So, I don't know at what point. It may be missions in there. I did a quick search on the ISO New England site. I didn't see anything in your area. And I don't know what the trigger for them is to start that. If I had to guess, they're waiting for the state of Maine to come up with a program to incentivize these things. People are patient. I wouldn't be surprised if their option agreement on the land gave them land rights for over 10 years. You know, they could be permitting this thing and doing the interconnection easily 6 or 7 or 8 years from now. These groups wait, they hover, and when the time's right, they exercise their option and then they move. I just don't think, and again, they could be coming to your office tomorrow like we're ready to get this thing permitted, but it sounds very preliminary.
I agree with you on that, primarily because it's not an allowed use in this zone, which is why we didn't do a moratorium or anything. But the sense we get from talking to the Bissons, because they weren't the first ones that contacted them, is that Mission may not be the ultimate one, but it's the thought is the Field of Dreams. If we were to prepare the zoning so that someone could do it, probably someone will come. If not Mission. You know, our sense with Mission, they're probably never going to build this. They just wanted to flip the permit to make some money.
Yeah, maybe if they're a flip shop, they could easily be thinking that. And again, I said you'll be surprised if people go out there and option 20 parcels of land and hope that 3 of them work in the end. So you just don't know what level of detail they did here. I mean, I took a quick look when you mentioned the property name, and it's close to the substation, which is good. It's not right on it, and it looks like it's got at least 2 lines running through there. It's got the big one, so I can see the allure. But again, once you come out of that ISO New England study process, you just have no idea because the way it works, and it's not fun these days, which is why I do more teaching than developing, because you are thrown into a group. It's called a cluster study of 5 or 6 other, 6 or 7 other businesses that are proposing wind farms, offshore wind farms, solar energy within, they call it the affected system area, say within 100 miles of there. And you share in the upgrade cost proportionally. So they look at all of your impacts collectively and say, okay, you know, we don't have the this is going to cost Central Maine Power $100 million. And Mission, your proportional share of that's going to be 35, and that might kill the project, and there's not much they can do about it. It's sort of, they can hire the best electrical engineers, but it's still an unpredictable result. You have to enjoy risk to be in the game they're in. It's a tough way to make a living, put it that way.
Other questions? I think we've run out of questions.
Great. I will send this to you, Stephanie, so feel free to post it. If you have questions, I love the zoning stuff, just because I've seen every game in the book that developers try to pull over towns, and it just drives me up a wall. So I don't know Maine land use law, but I'm happy to help address some of the issues that I would address if I were writing a zoning law when it came to big battery developers. So feel free to reach out at any time.
Thanks, Kurt. And yes, we'll post the presentation for folks to click on all those links. Thanks everyone for attending.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, everyone. I appreciate the time.
Thank you.
Yep.
And Andrew, thank you.
My
pleasure.
It's all right.